Welcome to Spirit Baby Radio. I am your host, Kelly Meehan, a citizen of the universe and a passage keeper and mentor for our new Earth children. I believe we are entering into a new psychic structure of our reality, and it is meant to embody deeper trust and ways into solid self-love and fearless integrity. Our new world energy of spirit babies needs us to consciously create within conception, trust pregnancy, and have freedom to birth and parent from innate wisdom. This is Spirit Baby Radio. Welcome to episode 224, September 2025, Creating a New Generation in Fertility Awareness, Epigenetic Healing for You and Your Baby. Are you ready to shift into another layer of your fertility? How do you heal with epigenetics? Are you open to new pathways into the energetic of body and mind wellness? As always, I have another special guest. Welcome, Dr. Stanton Hom.
Hi.
Hi. And I always go into like how I meet people, and I've invited every single guest, but like maybe one or two in this journey because I'm inspired. You said something in one of your amazing Instagram accounts, and the work that you do is just really incredible. And I feel very grateful actually for the work you do to speak up about all these things in the world. And I was like, I get this impulse and I go, hey, I wonder if they come on my podcast because, people could say no. And it was wonderful. Your team were like, okay, let's do this. So thank
Well,
you.
I mean, whenever anybody wants to talk about babies, like and birth and life, like all that, I would say people will look at my account and say, and some people will, like we were talking about before recording, some people will attack you, some people
Yeah.
will feel polarized, some people will thank you for your courage and your bravery. And I usually reflect back to them that it's not as much courage and bravery as much as it's like it's love. Like it's love for this thing that we get to just witness every single day, especially in your world and in my world, just the cycle of life and be truly growing from nothing into this magical, like miraculous being. I think it's worth defending. So
I love that.
I
Yeah.
appreciate
Thank
that.
you for sharing that. I'm going to read your
Mhm.
bio. I know,
Yeah, please do.
yeah, yes, let's see. I'm like you, Dr. Stanton, you is the founder of the Future Generations, a global movement normalizing vibrant health for the life by providing freedom, focused care, and education so we can experience our innate genetic potential. Together, he and his team have built one of the top clinics in the world through their innovative and against the grain approach that catalyzes radical healing of chronic health issues in patients of all ages. After graduating from the United States Military Academy at West Point and earning a Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry, Life Science, Pre-Med, Dr. Stanton was fortunate enough to be selected for an internship at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. And I didn't go over all your, so you do, you're also, you're a chiropractor. And
Hmm.
I don't know what
Yep.
all these, I'm not going to lie, I don't know what all those letters and symbols mean.
They don't mean anything,
Oh,
actually. No. Just a lot of, well, I mean, at the end, I would say what I love about the last few years
yeah.
of healthcare and all of this awareness that's happened is it's really taken this authoritative medical system and flipped it on its head. And I believe that
Mm,
many of my favorite accounts today are, quote, lay people, right?
mm,
That educating more and empowering people more than doctors ever have. And so I
interesting.
love,
Yeah.
and I say that they mean nothing, one, because it's just authority, and it's education
Yeah.
and it's all these things that are important because it's part of what crafted who I am. But really my goal is to just help people like us, right? Need all doctors less because
Yeah.
that's what, in my opinion, what true health and medical freedom is. So
I
anyway.
always feel, I always feel like people need their doctors and medicine. To me, it comes back to love, as you said earlier. It's like, I
Mhm.
feel like starting at infancy, starting at birth, it's like and parents aren't doing it on purpose. There's trauma, there's layers in there. But I always, like, my mother grew up in the medical system a lot, like, not kidding. Like, every 2 weeks, I was like, lived in the hospital with
Right.
this woman. And so to me, it was like, I really got to see like how much love she wanted and she could not get. She could not get it. And it's
Yeah.
really sad. It is really sad. And I see that with other people. I'm like, I always feel like we just want to be held, heard, and loved,
Yep.
you
And
know?
and it's the efficiency of that that drives this dysregulation in our system, then expresses a symptomatic, you know, maybe quote demise that it's pretty short-sighted and myopic to say, here, take these pills, right? And not to say that if people are taking pills that they don't quote help or that for they don't save your body to some degree. It's just to say, what was the signal? What was it trying to say? And if we don't look for that message or the root of that message, then man, what are we doing? Right. And so a lot of times I would say relationally, and especially in this cutoff culture, especially in like
Mm.
there in modern therapy and things like that, where you can like totally disconnect from the toxic people. Not to say that you shouldn't, right? But that toxic people in your life, it's like we don't realize what leaves what's unsettled, you know? And so when the medical system does that, they don't recognize fully leaving. It's like a check engine like going out in your car or turning on in your car and you're putting a piece of tape over it and then you're never just going
Yes,
keep on
I
driving down the
know.
road. You know what I mean? So,
I heard
anyways.
something really beautiful a long time ago from this woman, and she said, "You are the doctor, you are the medicine." And it's like,
Yep.
whoa, like,
Yep. Hmm.
and I think we are all deprogramming a lot what that means. And for someone like me, I've had medical abuse, so it's a little bit easier for me to leave the system. And I don't think
Yeah.
people realize I've gone more than decades without having to go into some severe medical intervention or even any medical intervention. I do feel like we are our own doctors, and that scares the shit out of people.
It does. It does.
Yeah. Why do you think that?
I think there's a couple reasons for that. The first reason is that we have 100 years
Mm,
of resolving responsibility to like the authority of our own bodies to a system, right?
yeah.
And it's unfortunate. And I'm of the perspective that I don't love to attack individual providers and I don't like to attack individual professions
Mm,
because I think that people are smart. I think that people are hopefully well intended. I think most doctors are, you know, they're here to serve, I would say the more, and I think they're in a system that
mhm.
is incongruent with that outcome in the short and the long run. And so we've created a tendency on the medical system where I often, when patients ask me questions, I ask more questions.
Mm,
Sometimes they don't realize that I'm asking them questions that help move them closer to the answer of their original question. And in the end, they realize it and then they own it, right? And it's because I'm trying to remind them that the responsibility is actually theirs. And so I think a part of it is also like when you hear that, right? When you hear you're coming from that old medical model and you hear that, oh, you heal you, you're your own doctor, you are your own medicine. It's so incongruent with what they have already
yes.
believed generationally, right?
Yes.
Generationally, we believe that and we passed it down, this authority. And when you're pressed with that, you have 100% responsibility and you're flying in the face with a belief system generationally that you
Yeah.
absolve that responsibility to an outside authority, especially a medical system that has no qualms about taking more and more and more authority from you. It's initially rejected because of how misaligned it is with what you
Mm.
believed, but then it's frightening. It's frightening because you're like, wait a minute, how am I 100% responsible for everything when I've been told that I'm not actually responsible at all? I think the other thing is
Wow.
when you're programmed to believe, right? So people, you know, we can get into the whole conversation about the immune system and COVID
Yeah.
and viruses and that type of thing. And you could dismantle germ theory and kind
Yeah.
of talk about terrain theory, which essentially gives people back power, right? You're not just defenseless to
Mm. Hmm.
all the invisible bugs that are out there, that all of them are like saber-toothed tigers and sharks. Like
Wow.
they're not
Yeah. What a great way you're saying that.
like we believe
Yeah.
that. Like we believe that all it takes
Yes.
is one bug. It's with COVID, right? They said, "Oh, on Amazon packages, the virus
Yeah.
lasts for 14 days on Amazon
I
packages, so
have
don't
to
touch
laugh.
your." So
Yeah.
you're like, "Holy cow!" Like, how do they know that? You know. But secondarily, what happens if you touch your package? Like you die. You don't like
Wow.
there's layers of things that you're supposed to be thinking about. Like you have an
Yeah.
immune system. You have an
Yeah,
internal.
people were like, I did have my neighbor that you said that she brought me a package and she was holding tissues on it. I'm not kidding. And you know what I
So,
did? I looked at her
yeah.
and I just did one of these, like, boom, grabbed it with my hand, rubbed my
Yeah, yeah.
face. And maybe I
Yeah.
was being a little like jerky about it
Abrasive.
because I,
Yeah.
I really didn't understand that whole thing. Like I know people said, no, I know so many friends that got caught in
Yeah.
and then came out. But for me,
Yeah.
I didn't get caught in the beginning at all. I'm not trying to be
Yeah.
boastful. I just
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah.
I think as a medical intuitive, I have a different perspective of things. I see things
Yeah.
differently, but nobody was asking me. They were scared. They're all in fear, and I'm just waiting. Like, I don't know.
Well,
Like, but yeah.
they won't ask you because if you're an intuitive, then you are
Yeah.
one of the most diametrically opposed to the religion of scientism, right? The religion of scientism is the thing that they weaponize, saying that science says this and science says that, and it's gospel, and you can't touch packages or else you don't. I usually use it this way, right? And we don't
Yeah.
have to go on this topic,
Yeah. Yeah.
further, but it's like, back then we were under the belief system, and it's really important from a mindset and belief system perspective to draw the difference between germ theory and terrain theory, right? But
Mm-hmm.
back then, we were told that if you didn't wear 17 masks,
Yeah.
that when you're driving down the street and you drive past a cyclist and neither of you are wearing masks, right?
Mm.
Or maybe you are, right? And you're wearing your 17 and they're wearing their 17, but they sneeze and one virus particle flies through all 17 masks through your ventilation system, somehow makes it through and lands on your mucosal membrane that you don't have an immune system, you don't have lymph nodes, you don't have a lymphatic system, you don't have red blood, you don't have white blood cells, you don't have an innate immune system, you don't have a humoral immune system, you don't have antibodies, you don't have any sort of defense, and you don't just catch it and get a mild case. You catch it, you get a severe case and you die. Like that's what we were
Whoa.
told,
Yeah.
right?
Thanks
We
for
were,
walking us through that. But yeah,
yeah.
that's so interesting because I was always wondering, like, what are people thinking really? Because it was just, yeah, it was such a, I was living in the city too. I'm not,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I know you, I was in Southern California at the time,
Hmm.
but now I'm in Oregon. You were, yeah, I know where you were in that city. It's a city. You're near a
Hmm.
big city and
Yeah, I
people
was
are
in San
so
Diego.
much more
Yeah.
chaotic. But I found it interesting because when I think we eventually did get sick, but it was honestly like years later as a family, and it wasn't a big deal. And I know people were just going, "What do you mean it wasn't a big deal?" And by the way, like I'm considered immunocompromised, like based on autoimmune stuff since I was like 13 years old. Like you name it from they're like, "No, it's Lyme's, it's lupus, it's rheuma." Like it was everything. And
Yeah.
I was like, "Look, I told people I didn't meet a virus that didn't like me. How about that?" And it's kind of like a joke because I didn't have any fear around it. And it was interesting that we didn't get sick for a long time. And when we did, honestly, and I say this with love because I know some people get hit really hard by their body's like connection with that. But for us, it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
It wasn't a big deal. But again, I think that all that stuff is frequency anyways,
Yeah, and so
you
the
know?
frequency that was put out, right? If you remember like the news, I usually make this fun like analogy, right? Like back
Yeah.
then, the news stations were pretty they're amazing, right? Because you could see on one side of the screen, you could see all the red numbers, and they were the, number of cases, right?
Oh,
And the
wow.
number of severe cases, and the number of hospitalizations, and the number of deaths, right? And those numbers and tickers kept going up, right? On that side of the screen. On the other side of the screen was green, right? And it was all the
Mm,
mild cases. It was all the people that recovered. It was the ways and the strategies that people could actually get better and how they could empower themselves to actually heal this thing, right?
mm.
No, no, we didn't have that side. We didn't have a green side at all. We didn't have any green. We
Yeah.
had only red. It was just red and like death, right? And when you create
Yes.
the frequency of red, death, fear, anxiety, it's not a mystery for people to be like, well, shit, like you touched my Amazon package too. Where's your
Yeah.
tissue paper? You didn't put tissue paper.
I know.
The last
Yeah.
person put tissue paper. I didn't get sick and I didn't die, but you didn't. You
Yes.
touched and you put it on your face. Like, oh, and then what is it?
You're
Kelly,
crazy.
obvious. No, you're not just
No.
crazy, Kelly. You're crazy, but you're lucky, right?
Oh,
The
okay, there you
only
go.
way that you
Yeah.
with immunocompromised, autoimmune, the only way is luck, right? that you didn't die, right? So,
So it
so
does come back to death. I hear what you're saying. I mean, it really comes back to death. But I know this, we can talk about this forever. It fascinates
yeah,
me because having people like you talk about it's so empowering and it's so like grounding.
yeah.
And during that
So,
time, I had a lot of my clients were coming to me all around I work around the world. So I would check in what's going on in your city. And I was hearing real information, which I really
yeah,
appreciated, like what the governments were doing, what the health. There was people over in Portugal's. They were literally in a lockdown. Like after 4, you're going to jail. I was like, what the hell?
mhm.
And
Yeah,
just
curfews.
working with their anxieties. And babies still want to be born. And I want to switch into that
Yeah.
is so this is a really important topic, fertility. And I
Hmm.
know you see this, and I I know we're in a world where there's been so much more advancements. And I know America is a little iffy. I remember years ago, and I read about this, where there wasn't a lot of rules with fertility clinics. Like anybody can open
Hmm.
up one. And people are shocked when I say that. I'm like, no, there's information. I don't know if they've put more rules and things on it now, but I said, remember Octomom? How do you think he got away with that? Because there was no rules. Like I honestly, I could go open a fertility clinic, hire
Wow.
some fertility doctors. But what is going on from your perspective? Because I get a lot of women, not just in America, but around the world, that are being really, I'm not against IVF, but I feel like it's an intervention that's way over pushed, like cesarean births. So, what
Yeah.
can you say about, I don't know if that's an area you've looked at, like and maybe we can even look at, natural conception too. Like yeah, there's a lot of questions I have, but what can you say about that?
So it's a really good question. I would say I teach some of my patients that, and I might be the only one that says this, right? And sometimes with moms that are already expecting, I'll say, just so you know, like your baby doesn't get smaller, like slower, less intelligent, and then you have more than one and they outnumber you, right? And a lot of people don't contemplate that there's no like pause, right? And
Mm,
there's no rewind and there's no slow motion and there's no return policy, like Amazon return policy for your
yeah.
babies. Like it's this thing, right? It's this thing that moms will two half cells come together and 9 months later, a 26 billion cell being,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
And I've interviewed thousands of moms at this point, and I'm sure you have too. It's like, well, not one has to consciously control the 26 billion cells, 50,000 neural
Mm-hmm.
connections per second. The numbers of systems that have to differentiate, like by 3 weeks old, 3, 4 weeks old, like we're growing this thing, right? Life grows this thing in life in mom's body. And it's this process that I usually teach moms also like, hey, this miraculous wisdom that's in your body, it's not in mine, right? It's in yours. It's in mine because I was born and I was
Mm-hmm.
birthed and I was conceived, right? I have a radical wisdom in my body, but I don't grow humans in my body. It's so alive and well in your baby that I just want to affirm in that before babies come,
Yeah.
because oftentimes we birth this baby sometimes in the conventional system, and then all of a sudden it's like, my baby doesn't have an immune system. My baby can't
Mm.
possibly have the ability to navigate anything without a Hep B shot or vitamin K. My baby's born like deficient of vitamin K for no reason at all, and they're just totally vulnerable. And we have to do some sort of intervention. And the reality is, I like to start with that wisdom, right? Because there is this infinite potential that exists in life itself that moms' bodies do, right? And so when it comes to IVF, it's really important to say like, hey, if that was your only strategy to grow your family tree, and if that was the only way, like what a blessing. Like what an amazing blessing to have that opportunity and to have that success, right? And to have that science, right? That science-based ability to navigate this chapter of your life. And it's very important to recognize that there are things that aren't included with regard to informed consent, with regard to risk factors, with regard to health of mom, with regard to health of baby, with regard to generational fertility and things like that, that I think are important to communicate about, right? Because if you don't have informed consent, then you might I myopically think no baby, baby, and that's all I want. But
Yes.
there are things to consider, right? On both ends for mom and baby. So IVF alone, when the artificial nature of conception and then like growing the whole human, right? And then the success rates and then the into the whole conversation on insurance or not covered by insurance. Like
Mm,
one family, the probably the most significant story I ever heard in my practice was a family that had been trying for over 10 years and had invested over like $400,000 cash
wow.
only. And it was just a blessing because mom was a medical doctor and
Yeah.
dad was like a very high up, uniform service person. And so they had the means to be able to afford that. But then you sit back and you're like, there's no like coverage from any third party. It's cash only, right? And so you start to like, and then when you say like, hey, they're like anyone can open these, like, what does that mean? So I honestly, I didn't know that. And
I don't know
so,
if it's changed, but I read this, and like not kidding, like more than 7 or 8 years ago, and I was reading this and I was going, wait a minute. I'm like, do people in America specifically, I'm like, do people know this? And why
yeah.
would you? You go to a clinic, it's private
Mhm.
owned, like you don't know. And again, I haven't looked into it recently, and I don't know with the internet, I don't know where that information exists
Yeah.
anymore. Like,
Yeah.
um, but it makes you like really freaked out when you think about that. And because there, like you said, there's good doctors and bad doctors. Those aren't your words, but there's good, there's so a
Well, that
fertility
yeah,
clinics. Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's talking about it as if everybody in that clinic or everybody in that system is like we were talking about early, super smart, that they're
yeah,
a great clinician, they're well intended, they're there to serve, they're empathetic. That's saying there's complications with the intervention if all the people
yeah,
involved are of the best and highest character and competence, right? That's saying and then when you start to kind of peel back the curtain, you realize that if anyone can own it, right? If anyone can own it, I don't know, I never knew that before. That's alarming to me, right?
yeah,
Because it should, like a chiropractic clinic generally, especially in the state of California,
yeah,
it's owned by a chiropractor, right? It should be owned by a chiropractor because it's a clinical care that, if not owned by somebody who understands or is licensed to provide that care, then how do they know when profitability,
yeah,
revenue, business models align or don't align with outcomes, right? And so when they're and then you look and peel back the curtain further, it's like, okay, well then what are the biggest drivers of healthcare, right?
mm,
And I would argue that it's cancers,
mm-hmm.
autism,
Wow. Okay.
and fertility. I would argue that those are three of
Wow.
the biggest
Okay.
ones. And then if one of them can be owned completely by somebody outside of the system who has
Yeah.
no real skin in the game, because they can't guarantee outcomes.
Yeah.
They don't, in my opinion, that I've seen, I have not seen, nah, I don't want to say that. It's like if then somebody who owns the business model doesn't have the same values of the outcomes that the patients that they're
Yes.
serving are looking for, then where is going to be the accountability, right? Like there, it's wild to think because it's not cheap, it's
Yeah.
not covered, and then thirdly, it's like if it's not like loved and communicated through this like essential nature of informed consent, it's high
Yeah.
risk. And if it's high risk, then who's then accountable for the outcomes, you know? And I think that's a big factor that I think about immediately.
Yeah.
We
I want to ask you, this is really important because you're in that field, you're in the space. I call it trend consciousness with fertility. I've noticed patterns. So I'm working with people, not just energetically, psychically, but very psychologically from my psychology training. And I'm looking at this and I'm seeing these trends. And I've talked to midwives too. when birth outcomes, like there's trends that happen. And so in fertility years ago, it was all about every woman had a bad egg, no matter what. I was like, where the doctors didn't even look at anything. And I'm like, that's interesting. And I started to bring that up more. We started talking about it, and a lot of the women around the world were like, you know what, you're right. They're just saying it, but we're not like, we don't really know, unless there's
Right.
more invasive look. And I know I can say for sure over the past 5 years, sperm quality is not good for a lot of reasons. And I've seen
Right.
it energetically, I've seen it with the children. And I'm seeing it because the children will tell me before the client even tells me. I go, why is the sperm coming up? What is happening? And they're like, oh, yeah, his sperm isn't good. And I know that's a big part, but what trends that may be true or not true do you see? Maybe you see things you're like, oh, this is true. Like the sperm thing is true. But like I'm trying to feel into what are the trends now? What are they telling women and men in these clinics? Because a lot of these couples I feel like can naturally conceive. But
Right.
when they're put into this situation of like, it's your age,
Hmm.
automatically writes them off when their
Hmm.
body could be so healthy and ready to conceive, right?
Right. Right. We just had a mom come in last week, and she has 10, and she's
Wow.
like, oh, by the way, and when moms pose a conversation like that, I already know. I already know that she's going to tell me that she's expecting, and she's 49, right?
Nice. Yeah.
And in her mind, she's like, this is incredible, and
Mm,
because she's had so many, like she's her peace of mind, her
mm,
understanding that this baby is already a blessing, her understanding of what potential, outcomes could be in terms of,
mhm,
successful like gestational periods and things like that,
mm.
birth outcomes, all those things. She's so seasoned that she's got a level of peace and groundedness. But that's not the majority of cases today, right? The majority of cases we have a similar, like we were talking about before, the divide between medical gated and what we actually, maybe actually know and believe. There's a disconnect in our value, in
Mm.
our medical system values and our values. And birth is what? Birth is obviously it's an emergency, right?
Yeah.
Obviously it's a condition, right? Condition. And then birth is a medical emergency that needs, some sort of like outside of assistance, or else like everybody's doomed, right? That's kind of what we believe. And then we
And I would
follow.
interject in that, like the trend right now is everybody's being induced.
And
It's a
so
trend, right? I mean, it's like, is it, and we're not minimizing that. There are rare cases. I just in my heart, I just pray like to the universe, like, can we
yeah.
really make it rare to have cesarean births, rare to have intervention, rare to be induced? Like, I
Yeah.
really want to infuse that in the consciousness of reality for our
Yeah.
children.
And
These are the
so
future adults, It's like,
like every given day, right? There is a trend in the United States that it's about a third, right? A third of our births are cesarean delivery. I think the World Health Organization, which obviously we
I
hold
know.
their recommendations with a grain of salt, but I think it's
Yeah.
10 to 15% that they recommend. So we're already not meeting that standard. I would say in our, network down here in the natural birth community, the midwives, the home birth midwives, I would say the average transfer rate is somewhere like under 10% is really good,
Mm,
15 to 20% is more common. And then in everything that I've learned in my training postgraduate, whether it's fertility, pregnancy, or birth and beyond, is that like globally, like I remember Anning McGaskin speaking at one of my conferences that I was attending, and she was just talking about whether it was midwives or OBs globally,
mhm,
like the standard is like under 2%, like
mm,
of not just of a transfer rate, not a cesarean rate, but a transfer rate, right?
mm,
And then Dr. Sue Fishbein, who is, maybe one of the more like present birth providers that did 24 years conventional at Cedar-Sinai, and then the last, chapter of his career is all home birth, right? It's all home birth. It's all, quote, high risk twins and breech, right? And his transfer rate is under like 1%, right? And so how is it that he can, and it's not him, right? It's him actually
yeah.
letting and allowing, which is not also not that too, right? It's not him having a philosophy, well, I'm going to let you, mom, birth this
Yeah.
baby, right? It's actually a consciousness around that sacred trust between
Yes.
whoever's attending and whoever's birthing, that we're trusting in the design and the miracle of mom and baby, right? And so when
Yeah.
that's the case, it's like, whoa, like most people might sit back and think like, wait a minute, like 33%. Wait, actually, our local hospital is like some in
Mm.
southern, some in Florida, some in New York City, 90% C-section rate. South
I think it's South
America,
America. Yeah.
yeah, South
That's
America,
so unbelievable,
yeah.
to be honest.
And then there's OBs like
Yeah.
Michel Odent, who, I don't even know if he's still alive, the French
He just
obstetrician.
passed away.
I didn't,
Yeah. Just like a few
but
weeks ago.
some of the books that he's written are about
Yeah.
how are we epigenetically programming out of our species vaginal delivery. And I would argue that, yeah, like we very likely are. And so when you take all of that into account, it's like, whoa, interesting. The trend that we're seeing
Yeah.
is induction. And I would say the way that we kind of Trojan horse that
Mm.
is, yes, be aware, be conscious of where you're birthing. If you're not home and you're anywhere else, what are the statistics of all interventions in that
Yeah.
setting, with that setting, but also with your providers, right?
Mhm.
And then really kind of sitting back and thinking about what your values are and what the values of your provider and your and the setting, the birth environment that you're going to be at, and then auditing that, right? Building a birth plan
Yeah.
around it, building something that strategizes what you actually innately you want for your baby, and then like having the support team that ensures that comes to fruition. But more importantly is, what do we believe? What do we know? If you didn't know that there was a C-section rate of, average 33% for the United States, and then some hospitals upwards of 50 to 90%, that's important to know,
Mm.
right? The causes of C-sections, I would say that one of the number one causes is induction, right? And if that's trending
Yeah.
high, then we then have to think about, well, then if that's often the first domino that leads to that outcome, well, how about I birth at home where that's not even an intervention, that's even an option, so that it's not even on the table unless you transfer, right? But then you go back further and it's like, oh, what do we actually believe about what's possible, right? If the World Health Organization says 10 to 15%, but there are providers sometimes in our own communities that are lower than even like 1%, then the success rate of you having a baby at home in the most optimal environment is that much higher. And so it then goes back to the choices. And so
Mm.
sometimes it always goes back to the choices. Sometimes I'll
Yeah.
say to moms, and I don't marginalize anybody for their choice. I don't have attachments for their
Yeah.
choices. I know what I clinically know is quote better, right? Right? In terms of, but to me it's values, right? If somebody's comes in and they say, these are my values, these are the values of my family, these are the values that we have around birth, these are the values that we have around life, these are the values that we have around baby, and they are birthing in an environment or with a provider where there's a difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then it's really, really, really important to reconcile that. Now, sometimes that means new provider, right? Sometimes that means
Yeah.
new environment. Sometimes that means I need to do something that supports my system so that I can actually
Yeah.
increase the likelihood of that value-based outcome. But if this isn't reconciled consciously, then
Yeah.
energetically, what frequency
Yeah.
are we putting out, right? We can say, oh, I believe in my body's
Mm-hmm.
ability to do this, but if there's a unconscious, unreconciled divide between your values and your potential outcomes values, then I think that's the frequency that sometimes imprints some of the outcomes too. I will say this
Yeah.
during COVID, right? Because we've
Oh
always done our home
yeah. Everybody was
consenting.
birthing at home and they could do it,
Well,
right?
well,
Like
yeah.
what?
But some of our home birth midwives were like, okay,
Yeah.
okay, home birth, right? Home birth is here, but some people were so rejecting the medical system that that was their
Interesting.
only intention. And so some of
Mm.
the home birth midwives were like, I need to encourage, inspire, educate. so that we raise this family's values because of, I mean, I see this, I saw this earlier in my career where it's less today. I feel like men are a lot more engaged. I feel like men are a lot
Yes.
more enrolled. I feel like once men know the value of a doula, they're like all in on the
So
doula,
great.
right?
I
Like
love
it's
doulas.
it's
Yes.
amazing to see. But now it's like men are very much in the trench with a lot of the awareness and the decision making, not to strip mom, but we kind of all know if you're in the home birth world that you can't. Sometimes the dad in the corner that's doubting and sending
I
a
know.
frequency of all sorts of different energies plays
Yes.
into outcomes. And so now I would say it's interesting to watch that I love that I feel like the home birth and natural birth community is somewhat better prepared to like people
Yes.
meet their values. But it's been an interesting dynamic, right? Where I would
Yeah.
say the intervention, the trends in the interventions are subservient to
Mm,
the education, inspiration, and values of those who are birthing, right? The family who
yeah.
it's a
Yeah,
family
it's
unit.
definitely a family affair. And I do
Yeah.
feel like a lot of the work that I do is I do get some emergency sessions of like, pregnancy, birth stuff, people get really nervous and scared. And I bring them back into frequency alignment and their nervous system. And like, what do you
Yeah.
feel is good? Because my thing is you and your baby are doing this, like not the midwife, not the doctor, not the doula, not the husband. Like you need to just sit and see what comes through. And I really like, I've seen such success on taking women into that space where they're nervous and scared, yeah, because of so many reasons. Because birthing in 2025 is probably just wild, right?
Yeah.
I'd like to believe we're improving, but I actually really appreciate the free birth movement, unassisted birth,
Yeah.
where it was way more hush hush. Like 15 years ago, I knew a few people that admitted it. Now there's this whole, and what I tell women, some women get really scared of that. And I go, you don't have to free birth, but let's push that consciousness to the surface to know that we know how to birth our babies with our bodies.
Yeah.
No body's bigger. This is the one I can't stand. Well, my baby was too big. When women tell me this, that were born in the 70s like me, I look at these moms and I said, I'm sorry somebody fooled you like that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and they're just like, what? And I'm like, because it's not true. There's so many birth myths. And I say that with love. I'm not trying to attack people. I have a certain level that I come with that it's like, a lot of people have been tricked and fooled. And we should be angry and we should do better. Like I
Yeah.
had a home birth transfer for no reason, but there was a lot of blood, so whatever. The hospital treated me very badly, by the way.
Mhm.
And it was just to me, it was like what empower I was able to stay empowered to go from almost having a cesarean birth to a vaginal birth. Like it literally, I felt like I was in a liminal space at one moment because I was like, I don't know what's happening out here, but me and baby are fine. And everything was fine.
Mhm.
And it was just misinterpretations, emergency, not emergency.
Yeah.
And so with the second birth, had a lot of trauma, like PT. I was like, oh, but then I remember my husband saying he was scared. He didn't want to transfer again. And I said, nope, we're birthing at home. This is what it's going to be. We're going to like really, I had to really anchor in and release the fears of my medical history in the past. And
Wow.
it was perfect. And I was terrified to the very moment of like, and it was just whatever it needed to be. And I had psychic experiences. I had sexual feelings in birthing. I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing, but I
Yeah.
was safe. It was dark. The midwife, there was two of them, were just so calm and present. And I knew in that moment, I was like, there's no way I could birth with spotlights in a system with the energy of all those people. There's no way. There's no way. And so to do that, yeah, it required so much self-trust, so much love, so much clearing of a lineage, to be honest, because
Wow.
I wasn't born that way. I was
Yeah.
born very traumatically, and I'm literally creating this new reality. And I have to tell you, like, my children, especially my one born at home, didn't wash him, never sick,
Yeah.
never sick,
Yeah.
never been to the doctor, but once to get a birth certificate. Um, Now I would have known I wouldn't have got him one, to be honest. But 9 years ago, and his nervous system, his regulation, I'm like, wow, like
hmm
this is incredible. And I know he came into our family with his different agreement, but also my husband was his first contact. The midwife goes, grab him. He was like, he was freaked out, and I have video of it for our own personal. And I thought, oh my gosh, like that was his first connection, was his father, his family, and bringing him and just being in that moment was just so incredible. And I do want that for other women. I'm not going to say birth is easy, it's
Mhm.
labor for a reason, but when we're not interrupting it, like my mind's people said, I have a 14 and a 9-year-old. So 14 years ago, people were like, what do you mean you don't want an epidural? What do you mean, especially in LA and the West Side, what do you mean you don't
Mhm.
want? And I said, it wasn't in my thought space. It wasn't an option. Since
Mhm.
it wasn't an option, I'm going to have to go in and do what women have done for forever. And they were all just like looking at, they didn't even know what to say. And I thought, I wanted my body's own nature to tell me. And here's what I tell women, and they're shocked. I said, when I'm going through, I remember this with both children, when you get that rush of what is it, oxytocin and stuff,
Mhm.
I felt like euphoric. Like
Yeah.
I was shaking and I was like, like this really good feeling. And then the contractions would come and then that euphoria would come and people are like, really? And I says, yeah, but when it's interrupted, unfortunately through
Yeah.
intervention, you're
Yep.
not going to have that, but it's
Yeah.
there, you
Yeah.
know?
It's like you brought up the free birth movement, and I think I honestly did I outside of the last few pages of the International Chiropractic Pediatric Association's like little magazine. It's called Pathways for Family Wellness. There was a book that was on one of the little advertisements that was called Unintended Birth. And
Oh,
outside of
interesting.
that, I didn't
Yeah.
really know much about it
Yeah.
besides the not the founder, but the godmother of the International Chiropractic Pediatric Association, the late Jeannie Ohm.
Mm.
She would talk about it. Like she had all of her babies at home. She would talk about how all of her farm animals had babies at home. Like no one goes to the
Mm.
hospital with farm animals. And in the end, like that was their model, right? And then the whole unintended birth was just a little book, a little advertisement. So when we were getting ready for our first, like I bought the book because I was just curious because I didn't know. And then you read it and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, this just sounds normal. It just
Yeah.
sounds what you should think about, right? And now today, something that I would say is trending with our patients is like how many babies are born in the car on the way to the hospital, right?
Yeah,
Because
that's true.
you teach like they may not be birthing at home, but they're like, oh yeah, we basically had a home birth, and we're like, yeah, you did, and you actually had an unintended birth, you actually had a free birth. They're like, like it's like this awareness that they didn't even realize that. Oh, actually, I did that all by myself, and I didn't actually wait. No, that was actually a better outcome. Wait a minute, and a dad put his arm on my shoulder before they moved, and they're just like, I just want to thank you because this
Wow.
was so different. It was like your baby was born in the car, in the parking lot, right? And didn't have any interventions at
And they
all.
were okay.
Or not just
Yeah.
okay. Dad was so moved that
Yeah. Wow.
he was so grateful and so
Mm.
thankful because I know their history with their previous two. I know
Yeah.
them through both, pregnancies and births, and I know what outcomes happened, when they had different settings, different environments, different
Yes.
interventions that disrupt that flow.
Yes.
And it's an interesting dynamic where, like, I would say most moms then, which we have a mom that just came back into town recently from another state, because everybody leaves California. You love California. Everybody leaves. The more I teach them about everything in California, they leave. It's a business
Uh,
like consideration.
California's, there's a lot to say about It's a beautiful state, but it's very expensive and crowded.
Oh, there's so many things that we could talk about. The whole other episode. But
I know. Whole other episode.
this mom was birthing baby at a birth center, and then
Mm.
at the time it was like COVID. It was like this time period where so many things were different, and mom was just like learning about free birth, and then realizing that even in a birth center was so different, right? Because there's standard of care and there's medical doctors licenses that, the midwives practice under. There's accreditation. There's all these things that lead into different recommendations. And mom was like it feels weird, right? And then outcomes were fine, but then the subsequent three babies are all free births, right? And I'm not saying it's one way versus the other because I think that
Yeah.
value, right, that value kind of alignment
Yeah, when
is
you do
something.
that value to me, I see the vibrational frequency of where
Yeah, yeah.
people are being met.
So it's
Yeah.
not
And
coherent, right?
and
It's
it's
not.
just like,
Yeah.
yeah, and some things, yeah, people will end up with trauma and but the thing is I feel like it is healable, right? I mean,
Oh, for
you probably
sure.
see that. Like I know with my firstborn, they told me not to push and I'm like, "Oh shit, like this is a good
Mhm,
imprint." I went to the chiropractor right away
mhm,
after he was
mhm.
born. Take
Yeah.
this, take my baby, fix him up like and we had to do some
Yeah.
deep repair
And
after. And I was fortunate to have that because I had the one-on-one time, the quiet space. I didn't have to run back to work. And I told my husband, I was like, because I was working with early intervention with children,
mm,
and he just took over everything. Because I was like, I need to be with this baby. We needed a good more than a year to really few years until I went into this work because I needed to
yeah.
just work with that early attachment that didn't get to be there after birth, to be
Wow.
honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that brings up a really important point that there are things, how do I say this? I think to kind of wrap up the entire conversation, because
Yeah.
we were talking about the very beginning, like why do we have this mindset? I brought up COVID not because I'm addicted to talking to COVID. I talked about COVID because we were so myopically focused on the immune
Yeah.
system and the environment. But most people don't know why COVID, whether you want to call it a psychological operation, you want to call it a pandemic or a plandemic, was successful in what
Mm.
I believe the puppeteers were pulling, was about epigenetics. It was epigenetics are so radically important to understand because most of us don't realize that for 100 years we've been made to believe that we're genetically like programmed not just to not heal, right? We're not biologically self-regulating and self-healing. We are actually biologically programmed according to conventional genetics for our own demise, right? And so most people like look at COVID and they're like, okay, what were the COVID deaths? And wow, 4.3 comorbidities that led to the greatest, like worst outcomes, the greatest number of deaths and worst cases in America. But no one goes back to say, well, what caused those, right? We believe, oh, my dad had heart disease, so I have heart disease. My parents had cancer, so I'm definitely going to have that. We, I was born C-section, so my definitely is going to be born C-section. Like, we believe that we are
Yeah.
inheriting the outcomes, right? What we don't believe is epigenetics. What we are actually inheriting is the environment,
Mm.
which comes down to internal, external, which comes down to lifestyle and habits and choices. But internally, it's what our nervous system is able to perceive, where it is coherent, where it's not coherent, and what it may have as a lens and a framework for what we believe about the world. And so when you recognize that you have this, we have this outcome where sometimes we have these toxic things, right? Like medical interventions aside, my diplomatic and politically correct answer is sometimes they save lives, right? And we should be grateful for that. But there is a disruption of what nature does, what the wisdom of a mother's body does. That's miraculous. That if left untouched, can do and move like mountains, like literally, like uterine contraction. A lot of times people don't hear this like data point, but like a uterine contraction is like 800 psi. I
Mm.
don't know where I read that and when, but 800 psi,
Wow.
like our car tires are like 30, right?
Wow, that's
And so it's the
interesting.
amount of
Yeah.
force that can drive a Navy steam engine. And we wonder why
Mm.
moms can lift up cars to save their babies, right? Like they can because there's internal programming that if my baby's in need, I'm going to lift the vehicle, right? And if we don't realize there is the essential nature of all the things that are right, they're essential, they make us sufficient, right?
Mm.
And then there's all these things from the outside that are potentially problematic because they're just toxic, right? Some of them are toxic, whether it's chemical toxicity or it's physical toxicity or
Mm.
emotional
Mhm.
toxicity, right? Or they're just toxic in the sense that they're not this, they're not. nature. They're not the mom's wisdom. They're different, right? And both of those create a dissonance in the frequency and the coherence of the being of both mom and baby and the whole ecosystem that needs to be reconciled. And I would argue that it's evidence that moms are that much more powerful than we believe, that our outcomes are actually better than we think, right? Because of
Mm,
how toxic emotionally, physically, chemically, a lot of these interventions can be and how disruptive they can be to the mom's innate wisdom. But epigenetics opens the window that what we inherit aren't diseases, aren't diagnoses, aren't even symptoms. What we inherit are far back more, and I would say nervous system patterns, habits, and muscle memory that, in my view and my bias, is that the nervous system is always changeable. It always learns so long as you are alive. But then further back are the beliefs that we carry, the energetic frequency that we see and view the world in. And if those can be optimized, I don't want to say that it doesn't matter what externally comes at you, but it gives you the best opportunity to be able to still have the birth that you want, still have, the babies that, we hear, and this is something that I know also, it's like sometimes we have the most peaceful, amazing textbook, quote textbook, if you could ever be textbook, home birth. And then some babies that are born in, one of our patients, it was her third C-section. She wanted to have a VBAC, right? She wanted to have a vaginal
yeah.
birth after two cesareans, and she didn't, right? But because that
Oh,
doctor was consciously communicating, empowering her through her choices, seeing, hearing, valuing, and recognizing her, like what she desired, and that she like was able to communicate that the outcome of that intervention, like sometimes we have textbook home births that have impressive, tough, like things that are hard. And then we have these, whoa, that's nowhere near what I wanted. But because the dynamic of that environment was so in like coherence, that the outcome actually leads to something healing. Where my mom told me, because I was definitely on the page of let's get you that, to get you all the people in your world that could have a vaginal birth after two cesareans, that I was like, whoa, like you're doing really good right now. And she's like, I can't even read that experience was. And this was having the same outcomes that she had three
interesting.
times, but a
Yeah.
completely different experience because
Wow.
the
Okay.
consciousness of her and the consciousness of the doctor
Yeah.
was in partnership, right? I think it's important to know that those factors are so important because when it comes down to it, epigenetics opens up that window what we talked about at the beginning, the 100% responsibility, right? That we are our own doctors because
Yeah.
the genetics that we have sensing the environment, there are nervous systems sensing the environment, but who and how we choose our external environment through our lifestyle is something we can control. I used to say the external environment we could control until,
Nature, right? Nature
well,
has its
you would
own.
say nature, but now there's like forced nature, right?
There's
There's
forced
there's
nature.
spraying,
Yeah.
there's
Oh
EMFs,
no,
there's
I know. It's like
non-radiating,
where's
all those
the
things.
where's the nature underneath all that? But when I say nature, I'm talking about the universe of
Of
nature. Or
course,
we
yeah.
yeah, underneath that, I know you know. Yeah, like coming back. But yeah, everything you're sharing is just so incredible. And I almost feel like there may, if you're open to it, maybe a future part two
Of
to talk
course,
about
yeah,
children. Like let's talk
yeah,
about them on the other side and how to optimize their best way in the world under the toxicity of so many things. And it's hard not to go there because then you're just, that's a whole other thing, right? But I want you to share ways that others can connect with you. And I'm going to tell
sure.
everyone you got to follow Dr. Stanton on Instagram, and you have a podcast, which
Yep.
I just started listening to. And I'm like, wow, there's a lot of great people, and it's going to take me a while. But yeah, so tell us more how we can find you.
Yeah, if you're in San Diego, my clinic is called Future Generations Clinic of Chiropractic. That's something that is always my home. I love the in-person nature of it. I love that you can't have a virtual and a Zoom chiropractic adjustment. And we build communities around our clinic and our like what we absolutely are committed to doing, which is one, reversing chronic challenges, this whole chronic disease epidemic that we're seeing in our
Mm,
kids and in our
hmm
adults. We have not the blueprint, but a blueprint on how people can actually reconcile and start to reverse and regenerate their bodies. Second is during COVID, we didn't know what was going to happen. So we started a podcast and we are, 100 episodes in. And we've been before censorship and deplatforming. That's why I have so many Instagram accounts. Before that, we were,
I was going to ask you about that.
yeah, we could talk about that in part two, but like in the no, sorry, kids and parenting category. And then we were top 80 in category before censorship. So they deplatformed us twice. But the thing that I would say that we're most known for in California is several live events in the past in 2020 and 2021 where we had Heart of Freedom 1, 2, and 3, where we had 1,100 people the first time and then we had 2,200 people the last time. And we were basically just committed to like, how do we take all the conversations we have behind our four walls that are really changing people's consciousness through this thing that is, obviously a huge psychological operation, and we just put it out into the communities. We put it on our podcast and we put it out in our live events. And people to this day tell us that those events were some big pivot points for them. Some of the best movements in San Diego and the biggest organizations, some of the bigger like platforms actually came as a result of some of the things that we were able to create for them. So our Instagram, drstantonhom.com, that's my main one. You can get from my profile and bio all of our clinic information, our podcast information, and are the best ways to connect.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Of course, Kelly. Thank you so much. It's my honor.
Yeah, and I want to thank everybody for joining episode 224, Creating a New Generation in Fertility Awareness, Epigenetic Healing for You and Your Baby. Thank you for joining Spirit Baby Radio with your host, me, Kelly Meehan. Please join my community and stay in touch with monthly energy rants, Spirit Baby poetry, and get access to Spirit Baby 101 with tips and practices at my newsletter at newearthchildren.com, and join me on Instagram with lives at Spirit Baby Medium, and join the Mighty Networks, the Spirit Baby Collective membership, and Motherhood to Mediumship. Remember, you are the heart that holds communication, and it is your time to connect. Come share in the great shift of your mind and the true spirit of your heart with Spirit Baby Communication.